All right, you're watching the Power Hour, where we bring you expert insights and inspirational stories to help you achieve your full potential. Today, we have a special guest joining us today. She's the author of the book Wife After Prison. Please welcome Shelia Bruno. Sheila, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Larry. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I want to first start off by saying thank you so much for joining me on the show today. And let's jump right into it. Wife
Okay.
After Prison. Tell us
Caught in the
about,
after. Yeah, caught in
right.
the aftermath. So, Wife After Prison was birthed from my then marriage to Kevin Bruno. Kevin and I dated in the ninth grade, 1976, MB Smiley High School. And after 38 years of no contact,
Mm,
Kevin found me on Facebook.
mm,
And when he found me, I was over in Afghanistan working, and I was on Facebook, and I just happened to see this friend request from Kevin Bruno. And I was really shocked and surprised because, again, after 38 years, I hadn't heard from Kevin. But anyway, I accepted the friend request, and he and I began to chat and catch up and all of that good stuff. And within an hour or so of the conversation, he told me that for 28 of those years, he had been incarcerated.
mm.
And that surprised me because Kevin was not that type of person when we were in school. But it surprised me, but it didn't deter me because I was like, okay, that was then, this is now. Are you married? Not that I was desperate or anything, but I just wanted to make sure that I was talking to a single man.
Right.
And so he said he wasn't married, and he wasn't married. He didn't have kids, and so he and I just began to catch up.
Mhm.
Within 7 days, he said, "Sheila, I want to marry you."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Okay." He said, "But I want to go and talk to your mom." And I'm thinking, I'm 54 years old, but whatever you think you need to do, you just go ahead and do that. And again, I was in Afghanistan, and so he did. He went over and had a conversation with my mother and my brother, and he came back. They gave him their blessing, and I came home. And 53 days later, we got married. So it was like 38 years no contact, engaged within 7 days.
Mm.
53 days later, Kevin and I got married.
Wow.
So, first 2 years, 2.5 years, simply amazing. Kevin, just real mild mannered guy, didn't require much. Uh, just overall a gentle giant, 6'3", just a gentle giant. I used to stand in this window and wait on him to come home. I would get the flowers and the roses and the just because, just a great husband. But going into that third year, I began to notice a change in him
Mm.
that I didn't recognize. He became isolated. He became easily irritated and frustrated by the least things, standoffish. Normally, when he would come home and greet me with a kiss, and he would come home and he would sit out in the driveway for an hour or so and wouldn't come home. And I just said to him one day, and I said, "You're changing on me." And I said, "Have I changed?" And he said, "No," but he didn't give me a reason or explanation as to why he was changing on me.
Right.
So things progressed. The behaviors, he got really, like I said, irritable about the least things. Kevin and I end up separating 3 times. We were trying to figure it out. And he said at one point, he said, "Sheila, I didn't get to court you." He said, "Maybe it's because I didn't get to court you." And I said, "Okay." So he said, "Well, let's do this." He devised this plan. "I'm going to move out, and I'm going to move back to my mom's. And I'm going to come over, and I'm going to date you, and I'm going to pick you up and take you out on a date and all
Now,
of that."
what
So,
what was your thought when he said that? Did you think like, okay, something is up? Something is going on.
you know what? I was just trying to see what would work.
Mhm.
What would work, whatever made him happy, because I knew he was changing, and we were trying to figure it out before we start talking about divorce. So if that meant, okay, he's been gone 28 years, he's right, he didn't get an opportunity to court me. 53 days later, we were married. So maybe that was the missing component. So I was willing to try anything.
Okay.
And so he did. He moved out. He would come over here. He wouldn't use his key to come in. He dated me. He would come drop me off and walk me to the door, and give me a kiss, and he would go ahead. He didn't stay all night or anything like this. Again, we were just trying to figure out what was this change, and why had he changed, and the behavior change. And again, it had gotten to the point where I remember one weekend we were on this supposedly date, and it was just not working, and he was unhappy and I was unhappy. And that day he was very, very mean to me. He was very mean, and he was very ugly behavior. And I said, I'm going to file for divorce. I said, that was on a Saturday. And I said, I'm going to go and file for divorce, because I wasn't getting any answers. And at the time, it began to affect me mentally, right? It began to affect me to the point where all I wanted to do was sleep, because that was the only time that I wasn't in emotional pain. And I had began to consume sleeping pills like they were candy, just so that I could sleep, because the mental anguish was so much to me. I didn't understand why my amazing husband, who had declared me as a soulmate, had begun to treat me like a cellmate, one that he truly despised. And so that Saturday night, I was laying in the bed and I was crying out to God, like, what is going on with Kevin? What is happening to Kevin? God, show me, tell me what's happening with Kevin. And I remember laying at the foot of the bed in a fetus position, just crying my eyes out. And I heard God say, I eventually fell asleep. I heard God say, when I woke up, Google, God has a sense of humor. He said, Google, can a boy become a man in prison? And I jumped up and I grabbed my laptop that now occupied the space where Kevin used to sleep. And I Googled those exact words, can a boy become a man in prison? And when I did, a list of websites popped up. The very first two. One was the psychological impact of incarceration. And it was an abstract by Craig Haney, a known psychologist, Craig Haney. And what I read is what I was living. And the second link was Post-Incarceration Syndrome and Relapse by the late Terry Gorski. And again, what I read was what I was living. And I sent those links over to Kevin and I asked him to read them. And he agreed. And then a couple of days later, he called me back and he said, yeah, this is it. He said, this is what I'm going through. And so he and I just cried on the phone because I had my answer. I now knew what was happening with Kevin. And for those who are listening and you're curious as to what post-incarceration syndrome is, it is a set of mental disorders and behaviors, mental disorders and behaviors of those who have spent time in prison. And they are significant if the individual has spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. And so there are psychological issues, there are behavior issues, and cognitive issues as a result of spending so much time in prison, living in a deprived environment, an environment of trauma, an environment of violence, an environment of where there's no they are told what to do and how to do it. It's just a mess, right?
It definitely weighs heavy on one's mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And my thing is this, for me, someone who will research anything about anything, I didn't research that. I didn't say, let me research this. a person who has been incarcerated for 28 years. Let me see what this look like, right? I didn't do that. But I told him while, before we got married and I was still in Afghanistan, we were on the phone all the time. And I said, you know what? I said, I normally run a background check on those who are interested in me and I'm interested in them or whatever. And he said, you don't have to. He said, you can save that money and I'll tell you everything. And which he did. He was very, very open with me. But what happened was Kevin didn't even realize the impact. He didn't even realize the impact on his mental well-being.
Right.
His mom saw it, but
Right.
He didn't realize it, right? And so once we discovered the post-incarceration syndrome, we said, we got to talk about this, because I had Googled, I needed support. I needed support for myself. Right after I decided, hey, I'm gonna file for divorce or whatever, I need to get myself together. I needed support. I was on Google trying to find support groups for family members whose loved ones are incarcerated. I didn't find any. There was not a lot of sites and websites and articles on post-incarceration syndrome like there is today. Right? It's a buzzword today, but back there in 2017, 2018, it wasn't.
No.
And so I said, okay. And I wasn't a big fan of Facebook, but I know Facebook was really, really popular. I said, okay, I'm going to go on Facebook and I'm going to look for groups. So I went on Facebook and in the search bar, I typed in prison wives, because I know that was a buzzword.
Right.
And so when I did, it was hundreds and hundreds of groups that popped up. Every prison that exists in the US, and I'm sure in other countries, there's a group for that. Right. So I was like, wow, okay. So I got up enough courage. It took me a couple of days, but I got up enough courage to go into each of those groups, not each of them, I'm sorry, 26 of those groups. And I just typed the question, have you heard of post-incarceration syndrome? And it's like I got back.
What was the answer?
Check it out. Okay. So 26 groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so for about 3 days, I was like, I don't want to go back in here and see what they had to say. Right. But what I did within that time frame, I added up the total of members in each group, totaling over 26,000 people. Right. So, okay. So I got them nerves, that courage together.
Right.
And everything was no. Everything was no.
So they were just probably dealing with the same thing you dealt with.
Dealing with it and not knowing, right? And so, and these were individuals whose loved ones were still in, or some had gotten out. And so when I talked to Kevin about it, and I said, we got to talk about this. And he said, yeah, we got to talk about it. And so he and I one night sit in this office and we did a Facebook Live. And we started talking about it, just pulling back the sheets of our relationship on how this came about and just disrupted our lives. And so then after that is when all of the cries start coming, like, oh my God, he's coming home and I'm afraid. And one lady said, oh my God, she said, had I known about this, maybe me and my husband would still be together, because we divorced. She said, I walked away to save myself. And one of the most heartbreaking was, the lady said, she said, maybe my husband would still be alive. Wow. She said 3 days after he got out of prison, he committed suicide. Wow. And so the question was, what happened in 3 days? What happened in 3 days that made him commit suicide? And had me having gone through this or in the midst of it and having read about it, I said, no, It wasn't in the 72 hours.
Yeah.
What happened pre-incarceration,
Post-incarceration.
incarceration,
Yeah.
and post-incarceration that he couldn't deal with. And so that's how it all began. And I said, I got to write a book.
Yeah.
And so that's when I wrote the book. And this book should have taken me about 6 months, but it took me over a year because I had to relive this stuff.
Right.
And it wasn't easy.
I can imagine. So now you got this book into like almost every prison across the United States, right?
So what I did is, the family members were getting it. And just because it's titled Wife After Prison, this is not a book just for wives.
Right.
This is for anybody, male, female, mother, father, anybody. Post-incarceration syndrome does not discriminate.
Right.
It doesn't. So the family members were getting it. They were buying the books, and Kevin and I were doing weekly lives. And so I was like, I said, they're getting it out here, but they need to get it inside.
Exactly.
Their not lives matter. This is who we're talking about. They need to know the psychological impact of incarceration. And so I said, okay, I am going to donate a copy. Something's in my eye. Sorry. I'm going to donate. I think it was the tears. But I said, I'm going to donate a copy, of my book to every prison in the U.S. And I did. I mean, not every. I've completed 17 states.
That's a lot.
It's a lot. It was over 400 books.
Yeah.
And so chaplains start writing back, can I get 10 more? But what was so heartening for me was to receive letters from guys on the inside that said, I now understand what's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And one guy said, I knew all the time at the back of my mind something was wrong, but I didn't know that was a name to it.
Right.
And then there was the one that I told you about. He said, had I known this, maybe my wife would still be alive. Wow. Said when a civil conversation turned homicide, when I jumped off the couch and I murdered my wife. And he said, I drove around with my kids in my car for 3 days. He said, but this is my 4th bid. And so what I want people to understand is, like I said, post-incarceration syndrome doesn't discriminate. Right. Men and women are coming home and they're suffering silently because they don't want other people to know that they're going through something. And so this is why we have to normalize mental health. We have to let them know, even those of us who have not been incarcerated physically, mentally, we've been in some type of imprisonment.
Oh, exactly.
I was having a conversation with someone on the inside, and he went to prison at 15. He got out at 54.
Wow.
And he did 39 years. And I said, tell me about your mental health evaluation. And he said, I didn't have one. And I said, you had to have had one. With the nature of the crime that you committed. I said, an intake process, and you're going from unit to unit, whatever. Tell me about that. He said, I didn't have it. I said, no, you didn't do 39 years and never had a mental health evaluation. Yeah. He said, Ms. Bruno, he said, when I hear the word mental health, he said, I think it means that I'm crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, exactly. People think that, so they shy away from it. They don't want to discuss it. I always say half the population needs therapy at some point. I say that all the time.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to back up, but that is what I say to reentry programs, that we have to normalize mental health. We have to talk about mental health because so many individuals go to prison at a young age.
Yeah.
And for the African American community, mental health, the word mental health is like taboo. Right.
Exactly.
So we have to normalize that. Like when I told him, I said, Miss Bruno has a therapist. I have my therapist on speed dial. He was like, Bruno, you got a therapist? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because what happened is, so when Kevin and I, we started communicating more, whatever, and he agreed to go and see a therapist.
That's a good thing.
And so when he did, when he came home from the first session, he said, she's not going to be able to help me. And I'm thinking, oh God, Lord, it took so long, please.
Yeah.
Please. And so he said, no. He said, she's too intrigued by the number of years that I was incarcerated. He said, she's not going to be able to help me. And so he said, I'm going to give her another shot next week. And so when he came back that next week, he said, no, she can't help me.
So where's Kevin today? How's he doing today?
Kevin is doing amazing today. Well, he's doing well. Mentally, he's well. Physically, he had a accident on his motorcycle, but he's doing well. And the thing about it is, even I had to go to therapy. And my thing was, I am going to therapy because of all of this that Kevin and I went through. Yeah, that was a part of it. But during my sessions, I found out that there was some things that Shelia needed to deal with. Right. And so this is what I say to family members, because a lot of times when our loved ones come home, we look at them as though they are the ones that have the problem.
Yeah.
Because they've been incarcerated.
That's not the case.
That's not the case. Yeah, right? Because we've had our own traumatic events that we've never dealt with.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I remember going to see my therapist, and the first day she listened at me and she said, Shelia, I'm going to give you 5 C's. She said, you didn't cause it. You can't cure it. Don't contribute to it. And something else she said, and she said, care for yourself. And I was like, yeah.
I was going to say that. Self-care, self-love.
Yeah. And so the next week when I was getting ready to go back, I had made a mental note of everything that Kevin had said and done that week. And I was going to tell her, Kevin did this, that, and other. And she just stopped me and she said, not today.
Yeah.
She said, no. She said, today, she said, we're going to deal with you. She said, we're going to deal with your issues. And she said, and Kevin can stay over there with his therapist. And if you guys decide that you want to have a marriage counseling, we'll meet in the middle.
Right.
And I was like offended. but she showed me. And she showed me the part that I had played in it. But the thing about it, so eventually Kevin did find him another therapist. Okay. And she was really very impactful in helping him. Because one thing we have to remember is that prison is a very traumatic event. And a lot of times, a lot of individuals who are currently incarcerated, there has been some pre-incarceration trauma that has never been dealt with. Then there's the incarceration trauma, the violence and all of the stuff that they see inside. And then there's the post-incarceration trauma. So you have all of these traumas stacked on top of each other.
And then they have to come out and try to adjust to society and their families, wives, kids, whatever the case may be. And it's hard to adjust to that,
And that's what happened. That's what happened with Kevin and I. Kevin had some pre-incarceration trauma that he had told me about. But me, and it was just out of ignorance, I never said, let me see what this looks like. Yeah. Let me see what this looks like, right? And so we eventually got a divorce, and I continued to to educate people and families, and going inside and talking to guys inside about seeking some mental health when they get out. But it was when I gained an understanding of trauma, because I was angry with Kevin at one point. I was like, how you coming here with this messed up life and messed up my life? My life I had a good life, you know? And then it was when I gained the understanding of trauma that I couldn't be mad at him.
Right.
You know, I couldn't be mad at him, because it was like, who am I to say that was then, this is now, get over it, right?
Can't get over it.
Yeah, trauma affects people differently.
Yeah.
You know, what may have affected him, impacted him at a different level, may have not affected somebody who had that same event. It may have, but it was like when I gained an understanding of trauma that I couldn't be mad at him. And I remember him calling me one day after the divorce, and he said, "You got a minute?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I want to apologize to you."
Wow.
He said, "I've been doing some work." He said, "I've been doing a lot of work on me, and I want to apologize to you."
Wow.
He said, "I didn't cover you." He said, "I didn't protect you." He said, "I didn't know what that looks like." You know, and this is another thing that I say to individuals who are in these relationships with our citizens who are incarcerated. You're thinking he's going to come home and be the man of the house, and he has never had that experience. You think
he doesn't know how.
He doesn't know how. And I remember Kevin, you know, telling me one day, and I did, and I handicapped him. I did, because I was making, you know, a 6-figure income. So I didn't want to pressure him about anything. So I took care of the majority of everything he would contribute. And I remember when things got a little rugged, I said one day, "I need you to be the man of the house." I need that. Look, this is out of anger. This is not, you know, I need you to be the man of the house. I need you to be more responsible.
And that was that a trigger? That sounds like it would have been a trigger.
Man, let me tell you something.